matter, next time we're debating this matter, a little later on. Statements by members, déclaration de députés. The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the painful events unfolding in Gaza are taking a deep emotional toll on many in Canada, particularly members of Muslim and Jewish communities. We must find ways to disagree peacefully while respecting the rights of free speech and protest, and the right of people to feel safe in their schools and places of worship. I have heard from many concerned that their charter rights are under threat. There is an effort in our country to marginalize and silence pro-Palestinian voices, to redefine and mislabel cultural symbols such as the kufiya as terrorist symbols. This is wrong. It is dishonest and shameful to conflate support for the Palestinian people with support for a terrorist organization. Like most Canadians, most protesters want to see a ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and the return of hostages and prisoners. As the government updates its anti-racism strategy, I urge it to address and define anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism. Thank you.
Before I go to the next member, I just want to ask members to please keep their voices down. There's quite a buzz happening right now, and we do want to hear the important statements that are being said. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today as an MP with Polish heritage to join with the Canadian Polonia diaspora to celebrate Polish Constitution Day. This day commemorates the adoption of their constitution on May 3rd of 1791, which was one of the first modern constitutions on the planet, showing that how despite occupation, war, and communists, Poles stand for freedom and democracy has persisted through the centuries. Last week, Canada and Alberta had the honour of welcoming the President of Poland, who expressed his country's excitement in partnering with Canada, including in our energy future. From LNG to hydrogen and nuclear, the future certainly is bright. And when speaking with President Duda, we both reflected on how our peoples prosper when we simply get the job done. As we celebrate Polish Constitution Day and for the first time in Canada celebrate Polish Heritage Month, let us remember the principles of democracy, human rights, and the freedom that the Constitution of 1791 symbolizes. Happy Constitution Day to all of Polish descent in Canada and around the world. Thank you.
The honourable member for Nepean.
Madam Speaker, Ottawa and other cities are witnessing unprecedented fatalities from opioids and designer benzodiazepines. These novel substances necessitate an updated approach to our response strategies. Our children are more than mere numbers. Each increase in overdose fatalities represents someone's child, a family member, a friend. It is crucial to hold accountable the drug dealers responsible for these tragedies. Without facing consequences, they will persist in flooding our streets and endangering our youth. I would like to recognize Natalie Bergin, Jane Egan, and Janet Towns for taking the lead and organizing on this important issue. They have set up an organization, Trace the Lace, to find justice for the children who have died from laced drugs. Let us do our part to support Trace the Lace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My school, École Chavigny, is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. The school brought in its first students in 1974 when it was called Poilievre Chavigny. At the time, the school was located in a field far from everything at the end of what was still called Trois-Rivières West. Today, some 2,000 students attend the school every year, and one area of the city goes by the same name. One of the school's distinguishing features is its drama program, in which students develop their skills in appreciating, creating, and performing a variety of theatrical works. Graduating drama students have the honor of representing Quebec at an annual international theatre festival abroad. In the same spirit, the school, a member of the Art Drala Network, also hosts the AQEFT International Festival of Francophone Theatre. A major celebration will be held on May 4th to mark the school's 50th anniversary. I salute Jonathan Bradley, the school principal, and hope he never finds my disciplinary file. The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Engaged and energetic are the words that best describe Louise Bourgault. As head of the Sherbrooke Chamber of Commerce and Industry for 18 years, when you saw her at a professional event, you never got the feeling she was only there because she had to be. Her obvious enjoyment of her work spoke volumes about the importance she placed on her mission, which was Sherbrooke's economic development. We worked together on various projects, and she was always so professional and open to suggestions. I remember in particular her involvement in the Economic Recovery Forum we organized together after the early months of the pandemic. Last December, she stepped down to enjoy a well-deserved retirement. I wish her every success in her personal endeavors and thank her on behalf of the people of Sherbrooke for her dedication to Sherbrooke's economic development.
The honourable member from Hastings, Lennox-Naddington.
Mr. Speaker, the following quote is tragic. These words should never be spoken, yet far too often this sentiment is shared. I'm not angry with my sweet boy. I'm not angry with those who caused him extra suffering. I'm saddened for those people because they don't understand mental illness, and I hope they become aware. I'm heartbroken and frustrated we don't have the resources for people suffering mental illness and for those people watching loved ones suffer. I struggle daily with the fact that my best was not good enough. I was unable to keep my son alive. Faced with the most worst situation a mother could imagine, Lori decided to honor the memory of her son, Mark, by raising awareness of the terrible disease that took her son. Mental illness, mental health and suicide affects all ages, all professions. This hits home and touches all of us, often when we least expect it. It is incumbent on each and every one of us elected to this place to give the tools necessary to our healthcare providers to combat mental illness in all of its forms.
The honourable member from Ottawa Centre.
Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the remarkable 90-year journey of the Jewish Federation of Ottawa. The roots of the Federation trace back to 1934 amidst a backdrop of rising anti-Semitism and economic adversity caused by the Great Depression. From the outside, the congregations of Agudat Hashem, Adad Jeshurun, Congregation Magziki Hadas, and B'nai Jacob recognize the power of unity, understanding that they are indeed stronger together. Through the leadership of visionaries like Rabbi A.H. Friedman, Caspar Kaplan, Archibald Jacob Freeman, Thomas Schwartz, Norman Zagerman, and Rabbi Reuven Bulka, the Federation has made an incredible mark on our Ottawa community. Since 2005, the Federation has raised over $107 million for the Jewish community. It has distributed thousands of Jewish books for free in Ottawa, and there's much more. The history of the Jewish Federation of Ottawa is a testament to the strength and resilience of the Jewish community in the face of adversity. In times of strain like now, the Federation continues to lead the fight against prejudice, discrimination, and anti-Semitism. Congratulations to the Jewish Federation of Ottawa for their community building and service.
I'd like to remind all members to please keep their declarations to the 1-minute time frame. Very worthy declarations which are being made, but it's out of respect for all members. The honourable member from Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, April marks World Malaria Month. Malaria continues to ravage the world, and unfortunately our country is not spared. Indeed, malaria still claims nearly 500 Canadian lives each year. When tragedy strikes, some individuals transform hardship into advocacy, and this is true of Olugu Ukpai of Halifax, who is on a mission to end malaria after losing his 16-month-old daughter, Miss Goodness Olugu Ukpai, to the disease. Olugu plays a pivotal role in raising awareness about malaria using drumming demonstrations to engage the public on this pressing issue. He and his family, Goodness's siblings, are famous at home as the uplifting Halifax Multicultural Drummers, and they led the commemoration of World Malaria Day on April 16th in Halifax, featuring special guests and drummers from various parts of the African continent. Artists and community members came together to support the cause and engage Halifax in battling this disease. Awareness of malaria is increasing, and we must maintain momentum. I want to expend my gratitude to Olugu Ukpai for his unwavering dedication.
The honourable member from Portage Lisgar.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, it has never been more expensive to eat, heat, or put a roof over your head. This Prime Minister pretends everything is fine, but it isn't. He is in complete denial. Look at the cost of groceries. Look at the cost of homes. No one can afford to live anymore. His record deficits have driven interest rates sky high, and the dream of home ownership is simply dead. Canadians are struggling to stay afloat. And what does this Prime Minister offer? He throws them an anvil by raising the carbon tax a whopping 23%. This has increased the price of gas, of groceries, and of everything else. In Canada, millions of people are using food banks. Mr. Speaker, this isn't the country that I grew up in. It's hardly even recognizable. It's clear that this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. It wasn't this way before this Prime Minister, and it won't be this way after, because Conservatives will bring home lower prices by axing the tax and fixing the budget.
The honourable member from Pickering-Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know when they call for emergency medical assistance, there is a team of compassionate and competent paramedics nearby to help. Canadians expect robust and responsive health care, and paramedics are an integral part of our emergency response teams. Today, we are honoured to welcome a delegation of paramedics from the Paramedic Association of Canada to Parliament Hill to discuss key priorities in ensuring that paramedics are recognized for that essential care they provide. Representing nearly 30,000 paramedics across Canada who have answered over 3 million calls for service, the Paramedic Association of Canada advocates for the advancement of paramedicine to ensure that these services are accessible, responsive, proactive, and safe. Paramedics are key to keeping our communities safe. Our government looks forward to our continued work with the Paramedic Association of Canada to serve Canadians and deliver the first response services they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Souris Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of reckless spending, the only thing this Prime Minister and his NDP Liberal government have succeeded at is making life worse for Canadians. With families across the country struggling to make ends meet, the Prime Minister continues to spend more borrowed money than ever before. Gas prices have increased dramatically, with some areas of the country seeing the highest prices in years due to the carbon tax, which adds nearly 20 cents a litre. Farmers, the very people who feed Canada and the world, are having to pay thousands of dollars more each year to run their operations because of the carbon tax, which increased to 23% earlier this month and will only continue to go up. Given his inflationary spending that drives up the cost of everything and keeps interest rates high, it is no wonder that Canadians are poorer. He needs to axe the tax on farmers and food by passing Bill C-234 in its original form. Canadians need relief, and sadly they won't get it from this Prime Minister who simply isn't worth the cost.
The honourable member from Caribou Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, the leading cause of death for children in British Columbia is overdose. Overdose accounts for more deaths in BC than homicides, suicides, accidents, and natural disease combined. Since 2016, over 42,000 Canadians have tragically lost their lives due to drug overdose. After 9 years, this NDP Liberal government's extremist drug policies have literally turned our neighborhoods into war zones, and statistics have tripled. Yet, unbelievably, they want to go even further and make cocaine, meth, heroin, crack, and fentanyl legal. Hard drugs are being used in playgrounds, parks, coffee shops, and even hospitals. David Eby's NDP have finally admitted that this Prime Minister's extremist drug policies have utterly failed, leaving ruined lives and grieving families in its wake. This Prime Minister must end his failed drug experiment today, or better yet, step aside and let a common sense Conservative government fund treatment and recovery to bring our loved ones home.
The honourable member for Alfred Pellan. Mr. Speaker, on this last day of Cancer Awareness Month, I'd like to highlight not only my personal history, but also the history of thousands of people from Laval. Since February 2013, I've been grateful to be in remission, but cancer continues to have an impact on lives, including my sister Nina's, who's currently undergoing treatment. The community of Laval is resilient and full of courage and determination. Every year, families, friends, and neighbors join in the fight against this devastating disease. Mr. Speaker, in the battle against cancer, every story is a poignant reminder of our common struggle. Every minute counts, and every act has an impact. Hope for a cure is a life buoy we all cling to. Let's get involved with conviction so our future can be cancer-free.
Lena, I love you, sis.
Bravo.
The honourable member from Timmins James Bay.
The homelessness crisis in Northern Ontario has become a social disaster. Municipalities, agencies, healthcare systems are stretched to the breaking point. And yet this Liberal government is telling frontline agencies to get ready for massive cuts. The Reaching Home program is an essential lifeline for northern communities, and yet the government is telling Cochrane District, which includes Timmins, to get ready for a 52% cut in funding. Sault Ste. Marie is facing 60% cuts, while Sudbury and Nipissing will get whacked with a 70% cut. This will devastate our region and leave vulnerable people at serious risk. In Budget 2024, the Liberals bragged about how much money they will invest in housing and the homeless, but nice words won't keep people safe. In Northern Ontario, they're ignoring calls from municipalities for clarity. This isn't good enough. So people in the North are asking their Liberal MPs a simple question. Will they fight to reverse the cuts and ensure that more funding is brought to the table to fight the nightmare of homelessness in Northern Ontario?
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the remarkable contribution of one of my predecessors today, the member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, block member, the Honourable Gilles A. Perron. When I decided to run, Gilles told me, look, if you don't wear out a pair of shoes in the campaign, you don't deserve to be elected. And on the night of your victory, make the most of it, because the next day you're right back on the campaign trail. For over 11 years, Gilles wore out his shoes, meeting his constituents. His greatest political contribution was that, thanks to him, PTSD has finally been recognized among veterans. We're talking about a historic moment for the people who defended our democracy. As you draw your last breath, I promise to honor your political legacy, Gilles, in the service of the invisible wounded. For Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, I will still wear out my shoes, thinking of you. Gilles, we love you.
The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberal government is not worth the drugs, disorder, death, and destruction. In BC, more people are dying as taxpayer-funded deadly drugs flood the streets. Kids' playgrounds are littered with needles and crack pipes, and it is impossible for law enforcement to do their job and keep communities safe. A year after the Prime Minister made crack, heroin, fentanyl, meth, and other drugs legal in BC, a record 2,500 British Columbians lost their lives to addiction. Last year, the former Minister of Addictions assured us they would end this deadly experiment if public health and safety indicators were not met. Both are failing. And BC's NDP Premier is now pleading with the Prime Minister to rescue them from this failed policy. Yet the Minister of Addiction refuses immediate action. Now the Prime Minister wants to expand his failed policy of deadly drugs to Canada's largest city, Toronto, despite opposition from the Premier. How many more Canadians must die before the NDP Liberals will finally put an end to this failed drug legalization policy?
The honourable member from Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 promises to deliver a vision for Canada that is fairer and more affordable for every generation. In my riding of Mississauga, Erin Mills, residents, especially younger generations, deserve a fair chance at purchasing their own home. That's why Budget 2024 proposes an ambitious plan to invest into more affordable housing initiatives to unlock 3.87 million more homes by 2031 for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 is also investing $1 billion into the National School Food Program to the benefit of over 400,000 Canadian children, so that no child in this country goes to school hungry. As we know, a full belly leads to sharper minds. There are so many aspects of Budget 2024 that work towards strengthening our middle class, and I encourage all members in this House to support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. L'honorable chef de
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the crime or the drugs. This government's radical, extreme drug policies, which are supported by the Bloc Québécois, have tripled overdose deaths. In the Journal de Montréal today, we can read there are used needles on the floor, there are terrible scenes to be witnessed, there are supervised consumption sites, some of which are a couple steps away from schools in Montreal. When will the Prime Minister reverse his radical policies which are causing deaths? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opioid crisis is terrible. It's occurring across the country. But what we need to fix this is not more conservative ideology. We need solutions based on compassion, healthcare, and science. We need evidence-based solutions. Now we will continue to work together with provinces and with communities to address this public health crisis. We will do so in a thorough and compassionate manner. That is what Canadians expect. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Minister is not worth the drugs and death. His extreme and radical drug policy has increased overdose deaths in British Columbia by 380%. In the year following his decriminalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in hospitals, transit buses, coffee shops, and parks where children play, there has been a record-smashing 2,500 deaths. Will the Prime Minister accept the BC NDP's demand to recriminalize those drugs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I just answered that question. What hasn't been answered by the Leader of the Opposition is why he chooses to continue to court extreme right nationalist groups like Diagolon. He refuses to denounce these extremists who don't believe Canadians should coexist with each other. Instead, they call for war and tell people to follow their instincts accordingly. The Leader of the Conservative Party is actively courting the support of groups with white nationalist views. It is disturbing, and he needs to stand up and apologize now.
Right now.
Colleagues, so soon in question period, it is important that we try to control ourselves. I'll ask the honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, please, to allow members to ask the questions and members to respond. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I always condemn extremism and racism, including from the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in hideous racist costumes so many times he can't remember.
The honourable member, Leader of the Opposition, knows that to make an accusation directly at the character of a single person is not appropriate. And I'm going to ask all members to control themselves. I'll ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to rephrase this question and to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, I also condemn the extremism of a Prime Minister who gives hundreds of thousands of dollars of anti-racism money to a Jew hater who has proposed shooting Jews in the head. I condemn a Prime Minister who allows the IRGC, which murdered 55 Canadians, to remain legal. And I condemn a Prime Minister who allows open use of crack, heroin, meth, and weapons in hospital rooms that threaten nurses and on school buses next to children. Will the Prime Minister reverse his extremist policies and the
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like. He shakes
I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lethbridge if she has problems with the chair, that she should challenge the chair in a way. But as she knows, as the honourable member from Lethbridge knows, that by challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I'll ask the honourable member to please to ask her to withdraw her remarks.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you... Ms. Harder, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting. Now back to the issue at hand. Mrs. Thomas, my apologies. Now back to the original point. I'm going to ask the Prime Minister to please, as I'd ask the Leader of the Opposition, you can start from again and to make sure that he does, to start his question, to reframe it in a way that does not call into the character of an individual member of Parliament. The Honourable Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader opposite is showing us once again what he will do to try and earn votes through personal attacks. He shakes the hands of a leader of a white nationalist group, then goes to actively court the support of the group's members and thinks he can get away with it. This is a group that advocates for violence against Jewish LGBTQI+ Canadians, against Hindus and Sikhs, against Muslims and Jews. Diagolong stands against everything we stand for as Canadians, and yet he will not denounce them or what they stand for. That is shameful, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that, like everything else he says, is false. He uses fear and falsehood and this latest distraction because he doesn't want to face the fact that he has become so extreme and radical that even the BC NDP is distancing themselves from his decriminalization of crack, heroin, meth, and other hard drugs in hospital rooms, causing nurses to have to stop breastfeeding their babies for fear that their contaminated air might end up in the breast milk of the baby. Why won't he ban these drugs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He still won't condemn these groups. Any leader that needs the support of a far-right white nationalist group to fundraise and get closer to power does not deserve elected office. This is a 19-year career politician who knows exactly what he's doing and thinks he can get away with it. It was a choice to pander to white nationalists, not an accident, and it is a choice to continue to not condemn them and condemn everything they stand for in his quest for votes.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member for the second time from St. Albert, Edmonton, to please withhold his comments until he has the floor. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is a choice for him to implement extremist policies that have taken the lives of 2,500 British Columbians every single year. since the NDP has asked him to reverse course on his and formerly their radical policy, 22 British Columbians have died of drug overdoses. But he continues to allow those drugs to kill the people in our hospitals and on our public transit. When will we put an end to this wacko policy by this wacko Prime Minister?
No. That is not there are a couple of things which are going on here today, which is not acceptable. And I ask all members, please, to keep themselves, to control themselves. I'm going to ask two things. One, I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that term, which is not considered parliamentary.
Mr. Speaker, I replace wacko with extremist. He is an
the Honourable Member to please. I'm going to ask the Leader of the Opposition once again to just withdraw that comment, please. And I'll invite the Honourable Member. I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to please withdraw that comment and simply withdraw that comment.
I'll replace it with radical justice policy.
I am not asking to replace. I'm asking the Honourable Member to just simply withdraw.
Mr. Speaker, I replace the word wacko with extremist.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition one last time to please withdraw that comment and simply withdraw that comment.
I simply withdraw and replace with the aforementioned adjective.
Mr. Poilievre, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to the authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting. The second matter which I was going to bring up was the fact that I was hearing some catcalling from the far end of the House. I wasn't able to identify the person, but I'll ask all members to carry themselves in a way that is dignified for this House. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition wants to talk about extremism. Well, a week ago, he visited a Diagolon encampment. Diagolon hates that minorities in this country get the same protections as everyone else, and they are charter-protected rights. Just yesterday, a week after the Conservative leader sat down with
I'll ask the honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes to please withdraw, to please only take the microphone when he is afforded the opportunity to ask a question. I'll ask the Right Honourable Prime Minister to continue. I'm going to ask the Right Honourable Prime Minister to finish his question. He has 15 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the association of the Leader of the Opposition with Diagolon and their disdain for charter-protected rights brought them to just yesterday, a week after he sat down with Diagolon members, he gave a speech pledging to overturn the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the rights of Canadians and our justice system. That's
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate you on your common sense today.
Si vous voulez, on va ma question. Si vous voulez davantage.
If you would like more questions, well, we have many that we could ask. Mr. Speaker, the weapons buyback program, Phoenix pay system, emitting visas, GC strategies, McKinsey, the government's management is really chaotic. The government should not be interfering with Quebec's jurisdiction. They should simply limit themselves to issuing unconditional transfers. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as Prime Minister, it is my responsibility to take care of all Canadians everywhere in Canada. I am the member for Papineau and I'm a proud Quebecer. So I will, of course, take care of Quebecers too. This is why we are working hand in hand with provinces from coast to coast to deliver services, care, and support that Canadians need in these difficult times. We will continue to be here to invest in communities, to invest in Canadians, and to invest in their futures. We will do so by working with provinces and municipalities. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Hand in hand with provinces, eh? Now, the Conservatives have been making statements that put them on par with Pinocchio, but now they're voting with the Liberals. The Conservatives now also want to interfere with provincial jurisdiction. All premiers unanimously made a request. But against all of those premiers, the Liberals and the Conservatives have voted down a motion calling for respect of provincial jurisdiction. So if the Liberals and Conservatives really care about Quebec, then I welcome them to read our policies. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc's policies seek to pick fights between Quebec and Ottawa. On this side of the House, we're investing in Quebecers' futures. We're investing in families, seniors. We're investing in dental care. In fact, as of tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, seniors in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada will have advantages. We're investing to increase daycare spots. We're investing in green technology and a more prosperous future for all. We're here to work together, not to fight, and we will continue on that track. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, what a day today. I'm glad that those remaining are adults. The adults are still here in the room. 25% of Quebecers are unable to live with dignity. That's a staggering number. That's 2 million people. 25% of Quebecers are living on less than the minimum income required to live a reasonably decent life. They're too squeezed to afford the goods and services they need. Meanwhile, the Liberals are giving gifts to big oil. Everything costs more. Housing has become insanely expensive. Housing is the single biggest expense for families. So when are the Liberals going to build housing that Quebecers can afford? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly why in our recent budget, we have prioritized creating equal opportunities for all generations. A huge chunk of the investments in Budget 2024 are investments in housing, affordable housing. We wish to ensure that young people, Millennials and Generation Z, will have a future in which they can buy a home, in which they can pay rent, and pay rent such that their credit rating will increase so that they can eventually start paying a mortgage. We're investing more than anyone before us.
Speaker, Canadians deserve to retire with dignity, and they can with the world-renowned Canada Pension Plan. But Danielle Smith is trying to pull Alberta out of the CPP, and the Conservative leader has spent his entire career attacking workers' pensions while he benefits from a public pension himself. New Democrats are fighting back. Today I tabled a bill that will protect the CPP from Conservatives and give Canadians and Albertans a say in the future of their CPP. Will the Liberals support my bill, or will they stand with the cut-and-gut Conservatives?
Hear, hear.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're pleased to see the NDP joining us in the fight to protect the Canada Pension Plan. Actually, one of the very first things we did in government about 6 months in was strengthen the Canada Pension Plan for future generations. We will continue to stand against Conservatives who for decades have been railing against the Canada Pension Plan, and indeed the plan by Alberta to dismantle the Canada Pension Plan, to put at risk the pensions of millions of Albertan seniors, is absolutely irresponsible, and we will continue to stand in defense of the Canada Pension Plan and look forward to standing with all members in this House in doing just that.
Hear, hear.
C'est une journée exceptionnelle.
Well, today is a very unique day. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The Prime Minister has left. He's no longer with us here on this Tuesday. Now, the Prime Minister said that he's working hand in hand with provinces. He insisted that he wants to ensure that everyone receives good services from the Government of Canada, and that he wants that for all Canadians. Well, there are some services which are under provincial jurisdiction. So, am I right in understanding that the Prime Minister feels that when provinces deliver services, they are lower quality than when Ottawa delivers them? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I'm worried for my Bloc Québécois friends. I hardly recognize them anymore. They have always said that housing is important. They always say that housing is important. The Conservatives vote against it, and then the Bloc votes against it. The Conservatives say to vote against climate change. The Bloc sometimes votes against too, but I'm worried. This sovereigntist party, they are following advice from the Conservatives, and so they're in fact losing their own sovereignty. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I understand that there's been less preparation, but yesterday, the Conservatives, the Liberals, and even the NDP, I say even because it's one and the same, they all voted down a Bloc Québécois amendment. The amendment accepted the budget. We're team players, but all we were calling for was respect for provincial jurisdiction. But all these federalists got together and voted against the Bloc Québécois. How does the minister feel about that? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc has failed Quebecers. They promised Quebecers that they would support housing, but they voted against housing. They said to Quebecers that they would support fighting climate change. They vote against it. We try to help young people. They vote with the Conservatives. They vote against what we're doing. So does the Bloc Québécois realize that they are, in fact, becoming the separatist wing of the Conservative Party? The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, good afternoon. Quebec has just announced $603 million to stop the decline of the French language. Most of the money will go towards French language training for temporary foreign workers. This is good news for the vitality of the French language, but this alone will not be enough. Why not? Because the majority of foreign workers are entirely under the jurisdiction of the federal government through the International Mobility Program. And the federal government has no language requirements. So, given that the Liberals have acknowledged the decline of the French language, they too must do their part. Will the government heed Quebec's request and add French language requirements for foreign workers under its jurisdiction? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We, of course, support French language training. We invested $5.4 billion in Quebec since 2015 for French language training, and things are working well. The Bloc is often viewed as a party that picks fights, but I would like to highlight the contribution of the member across the way. He has supported the fact that family members of temporary residents can stay longer. The government of Quebec called for that, and we worked together with the Bloc Québécois to ensure that this would be possible.
Vancouver East.
Priority processing for the Lifeboat scheme for Hong Kongers has gone from 6 months to 21. Processing delays for their PR application means their work permit and study permit are going to expire. The medical coverage will end. Dependent children will no longer be able to access education. Hong Kongers will be sent back to face an escalation of arbitrary detentions and arrests because of the draconian Safeguarding National Security Bill. Will the Minister resume the 6-month priority processing average for Hong Kongers and automatically renew their work and study permit as they wait?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, we continue to stand with the people of Hong Kong. We will work on processing times. We continue to work with people who seek refuge in Canada, and will continue to do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Timmins, James Bay.
For decades, people in James Bay have struggled to overcome systemically racist underfunding of health services. Every region deserves proper hospital services, and we're finally on the verge of having a proper hospital built in the Winnebago Health region. But now at the 11th hour, the Liberals have walked away. I mean, heck, even Doug Ford is bringing the province to the table. So will the minister explain why she made the health authority jump through so many hoops only to tell them that the Liberals had no intention of funding this badly needed project?
First of all, let me...
Just 1 minute. I'd like to just apologize to the member from Timmins, James Bay. I might have reduced the time of his question. We got the timing wrong here on the clock. I just want to make sure if the honourable member can please start again and start his question from the top, just to make sure that he has his full question. The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For decades, people in James Bay have struggled to overcome systemically racist underfunding of health services. Every region deserves a proper hospital, and we're finally on the verge of having a proper hospital built in the Winnebago Health region. But now at the 11th hour, the Liberals have walked away. I mean, heck, even Doug Ford is bringing the province to the table. So will the minister explain why she made the health authority jump through so many hoops only to tell them that the Liberals have no intention of funding this badly needed project?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
And let me reassure him that I spoke with Grand Chief Fiddler just last week about this very project. We're working with the province and with the region to make sure that everyone can access quality health care no matter where they live.
From Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, disinformation, extremism, and violent hate are on the rise around the world, including here at home. Standing up to far-right extremism is something that I know this government takes very seriously. But it is shameful that the Leader of the Opposition entertained and posed for photos with organizations our national security agencies call a far-right extreme group rooted in white nationalism that promote hate and violence. Can the government please tell this House how important it is that these far-right extreme groups be condemned and addressed for the real threat that they are?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Mr. Speaker, while we're investing $273 million towards Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate in this budget, the Leader of the Official Opposition is encouraging hate as he cozies up to far-right white extremist supporters.
The Speaker has made rulings about this in terms of lending intentions to honourable members in this House. So I'll ask the Honourable Minister to, with about 24 seconds left on the clock, to please correct her statement in a way that is respectful of all members.
Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have been very deliberate about choices to be inclusive, while the Leader of the Opposition is making it a very deliberate choice in courting to far-right extremists. This is, Mr. Speaker, extremely reckless, it's dangerous, and he owes Canadians an apology, and he needs to denounce the closing up that he's doing with these groups.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebec will not reach its goals in French language training if there are more and more people arriving. We can't take in 54% of all asylum seekers of Canada. It's a matter of social justice for the people who arrive. More people to house and to educate and sometimes to feed. But it's also about integration in Quebec society, because we have a duty to provide these people with all the tools they need to succeed. Will the Minister finally announce a fair breakdown of asylum seekers between Quebec and the provinces? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, sometimes I wonder if the Bloc is clear on what is happening. Quebec is doing more than its fair share, but 54% is an exaggerated number. If we look at all the humanitarian aspects, it's really 25%. Yes, Quebec is doing more. There needs to be collaboration with the Government of Canada, but we need to work together. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. We are ready to welcome people. We won't be able to fight the decline in the French language if the federal government is working in the opposite direction. We have 2/3 of temporary residents coming in. The federal government is not taking on its responsibility in French language training. Ottawa is responsible for the skyrocketing needs of French language training in Quebec, and it's doing nothing. The Liberals repeat over and over that more needs to be done to protect French. So why do they refuse to do more to protect French? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. It's very clear, Mr. Speaker, we will be there for Quebec to do more to support French in Quebec. $54 billion is not nothing. It's what we're contributing, what we've contributed since 2015. But I could ask a question to the member opposite. Does he think we should bring in more asylum seekers from Haiti? Would he accept more in Quebec? The Honourable Member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's in this more civilized parliamentary context that I announce that Budget 2024 presents a generational plan to build more housing for Canadians. We already know that those in the skilled trades will be the key to the success of building these millions of homes. Since the Canada's Building Unions Trade meeting, it's happening now in the National Capital Region. Can the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages tell us what our government is doing to ensure that Canada has the workforce it needs to get the job done throughout the country? The Honourable Member of Employment and Workforce Development. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Honourable Member for this question. Yesterday, I was at the Canada Buildings Trades Unions conference to discuss with people how we will address the housing crisis in Canada. Budget 2024 sets out money to fund training and apprenticeships for workers from coast to coast so they can build homes for the next decades. Mr. Speaker, the skilled trades will drive this effort. We will guarantee they have everything they need to get the job done.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe Bagot. Mr. Speaker, La Presse recently informed us of the existence of the obsolete or surplus goods program of the Border Services Agency. Basically, this program aims to give money to businesses that throw out their excess merchandise. We're talking about non-perishable merchandise. For example, let's say I have a jeans business. I import a new type and I end up with out-of-date, unsold jeans. I have two choices. If I throw them out in the garbage, Ottawa reimburses me for the customs charges, but if I donate them to a charity, I don't get a cent. What an invitation to waste. Who in Ottawa thinks that this is a good idea? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague. I was not aware of a particular case. If he asks us if we're in favor of that type of waste, I think, his opinion. The answer, of course, is no. I will be pleased to speak to the Border Services Agency to see if it's possible to find another solution. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe Bagot. Well, today, the level of questions has increased. I'm not sure about the answers. The Border Services Agency has reimbursed businesses over $20 million for throwing out their merchandise after making it unusable. At a time when food banks are serving more people than ever because times are tough, Ottawa is funding waste at the expense of social solidarity. It doesn't make sense. Will the Minister of Public Safety review this very bad program which penalizes generosity and encourages waste? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we will absolutely review the facts that my honourable colleague has put forward because I, of course, share his concern in the face of this situation. I will be pleased to follow up with the agency, the Border Services Agency. I look forward to doing so.
The Honourable Member from Scarborough-Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, April is Cancer Awareness Month. Though the month is ending, the need for cancer awareness and education continues. According to the Canadian Cancer Society, 2 out of 5 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. In 2023 alone, an estimated 239,000 Canadians were newly diagnosed with cancer. Can the Minister of Health update this House on what our government is doing to support Canadians impacted by cancer?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for Scarborough-Agincourt for her continued advocacy. She knows all too well, as do I and every member of this House, that so few of us get to make it through this life and not be touched by cancer, and that it is an imperative that we do all that we can. And I want to take a moment to recognize the Canadian Cancer Society, Breast Cancer Canada, and all those that work tirelessly to advocate. We put $1 billion over the last 5 years to work through breakthroughs in science and to improve how we prevent and treat cancer. We're taking critical action in prevention. Together, we can see an end to cancer, and I thank that for the time to speak, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Mr. Speaker, the community of Port Renfrew in my riding relies on recreational fishing as the major economic driver in the region, bringing in an estimated $26 million per season. But the Liberals plan to end that important economic pathway and are failing to provide credible data to justify the fishing closures. This move will harm the local economy and devastate the local community, including the Pacheedaht First Nation. This is shameful. Why are the Liberals putting Port Renfrew's economy at risk with these ill-informed and punitive fishing closures?
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member opposite. It was just a couple of weeks ago I was in BC talking to a lot of First Nations communities on a whole host of topics that are important to them and important to their communities. I know this one is equally important in terms of recreational fishing from a food and ceremonial perspective, cultural perspective, and an economic perspective. And I will set some time aside to discuss the item with the member opposite very soon. Thank you.
Good job, Mike. Good job, Mike.
The Honourable Member from Churchill, Kiwatanuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, today was the final day for most Canadians to file their taxes, and thanks to NDP pressure, the wealthy will be paying somewhat more. Unlike the Conservative leader who, while in government, gave $60 billion to corporations, New Democrats would rather fund key public services like dental and pharmacare. As usual, the Liberals continue to ignore the need for serious tax fairness at a time of rampant corporate greed. We still use a system where wealthy corporations can get out of paying $30 billion in taxes in 1 year. Does this government have an idea how much money the wealthiest Canadians will deprive Canada of this year?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for the question. This budget is about fairness for every generation. It is about making the essential investments in housing, in affordability, in economic growth. And we agree with the idea behind the question that the way to finance those investments is to ask those who are doing the best in our society to contribute a little bit more. That's why in the budget we are proposing to increase the capital gains inclusion rate. We hope all members will support that.
Colleagues, this brings to the end of the questions which are, please listen carefully. This brings to the end of the questions which were indicated by the various whips in the House. Now we have question period which will continue on for another 5 minutes, and so we're going to other members who will rise, keeping all proportion in compte. Alors, je vois que
I see the Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre is on his feet, but unfortunately today there is no allocation for independent members today. It'll be based on the whole week. So I recognize the member for Avignon-Lamitis-Matapédia. The government has decided once again to postpone the assault weapons buyback program. Once again, Ottawa was neglectful in planning the program, and the Liberals have decided to postpone it all to 2025. And as a result, it'll be the Conservatives who ultimately decide on the future of this buyback program. Why isn't the Liberal government dealing with this itself instead of passing the buck to the Conservatives? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the colleague for the question. As she knows full well, I share, and we as a government fully share, her support for the program to buy back military-style firearms. I don't share her pessimism, however, about the federal decision. But the good news is that we are already at work developing a buyback program that will be in place this year and next year. We made a commitment to buy back those firearms, and that's precisely what we're going to do. The Honourable Member for Lamitis-Matapédia, Avignon. The buyback program was the result of a decade of work, and public safety is once again being put at risk. The Liberals have no right to betray their commitment. They have no right to lack courage, and they have no right to pass the buck to the next government and leave those weapons in circulation. Will the government do something before it's too late? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I repeat again, we absolutely intend to keep our commitment to Canadians and buy back those weapons which we made illegal. We will continue to work very specifically to ensure that the commitment we made a number of years ago to have an effective buyback program will indeed be in place, and we will not stop until we finish the job.
The Honourable Member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, the Pension Advisory Board for our CBSA officers has approved retirement after 25 years of service. Our men and women on the front line of our country have been defending and enforcing the law and ensuring trade and travel is safe and secure in our country. they have not been treated equally as other officers? And why has the President of the Treasury Board ignored this case for equality? Will the President of the Treasury Board now act and make sure there's equality for our men and women of service protecting our front lines?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, actually, as part of the conciliation process, the Government of Canada and PSAC entered into PIC hearings with the Border Services Group. We are waiting for the decision of that body. We believe that all deals are best made at the table, and we look forward to reading that report and working very closely with our counterparts. We're optimistic that the PIC recommendations will provide both parties with a plan to go forward, just as past PIC processes have been able to do. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, people with disabilities across the country disproportionately live in poverty, and as a result of their advocacy, this government committed to a Canada Disability Benefit back in 2021. After years of advocacy, what's been proposed in Budget 2024 is nothing that the disability community has called for. $200 a month, no one called for that. Using the disability tax credit, no one called for that. And wait until July 2025, no one called for that. Can the minister share who actually asked for what's in the proposed Canada Disability benefit?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Disability Benefit is a major milestone in our unwavering commitment to creating a more inclusive and fairer Canada. Through Budget 2024, Mr. Speaker, we have committed over $6 billion as the initial investment for the Canada Disability Benefit. This is the first ever federal benefit designed for persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we recognize there's more to do, and we'll be working alongside provinces and territories to first make sure that there are no clawbacks for persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, this is a next step in the journey for the Canada Disability Benefit, not the destination.
And so, colleagues, brings us to an end of a remarkable question period. Orders of the day. Of the Honourable Member. I see that there are two members rising on a point of order. I'd like to first recognize the Honourable Member from Grand Prairie Mackenzie.
Speaker, today I rise to ask for unanimous consent from the House that a take-no debate on drug decriminalization policy and toxic drug overdose be held later today.
I regret to inform the Honourable Member that unfortunately there is not unanimous consent for that motion. I also recognize, rising on a point of order, the Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it was a remarkable question period, and I can only speak for, I'm sure, many of us, for your efforts at maintaining decorum under difficult circumstances. What I wanted to speak to, Mr. Speaker, was, with all due respect, misidentifying members of Parliament who sit here as members of the Green Party as independents. And I would like to ask, Mr. Speaker, that in future perhaps your office can reflect on our role and consider that the practice of accepting a list of speakers from opposition benches from party whips is not a rule or regulation of this House, but is a common habit and practice. And, Mr. Speaker, the rule is that only you can recognize who speaks in this place, and only you can decide who catches your eye. And I would commend to you, Mr. Speaker, if you're willing to look at it, the practice of the Palace of Westminster in looking at written requests from members of the place that the Speaker decides the day before, so that there's order in the House and it's no longer controlled by party whips who have an agenda other than decorum. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank the Honourable Member from Esquimalt, I keep on saying, wanted to say Esquimalt Juan de Fucas, it was once known, Saanich Gulf Islands, for her intervention, informative as always, and the Speaker will take that into account. Orders of the day.